Welcome to this special show right here on the NDTV network. All around us in our cities today and in perhaps even some of the smaller towns in India, what we find is chaos. A lot of it is led by the traffic mess and the lack of certain infrastructure. It is something that we continue to speak about but find few solutions for. Now, don't forget, in all of this, there is the backdrop of a booming economy, or one that's at least set to boom again. And within that, the automobile space commands a lot of attention. By 2020, some projections put us as being the third largest automobile market in the world. And while we're already putting a lot of cars and bikes on the road, there will just be a whole lot more coming. In that scenario, should we only be worrying about the government doing something about it? Or should we also be looking for solutions which come from technology or indeed the development of some of these new cars and bikes? To discuss all of that, we have a very special panel here with us today and also a great studio audience. But let me introduce the panel to you. First up on my left, we've got Mr. Vijay Ratnaparke, the Managing Director at Robert Bosch India. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Next to him, we have Mr. Raj Sarkar, the VP Marketing at Ford India. So we, of course, have the OEM view as well. Thank you, Raj, for being here.
My pleasure.
Satish Zadav is the Director at Intel, and we'll speak about that technology piece, of course, and a whole lot more. And also joining us, Mr. Rajiv Singh, partner at KPMG, specifically looking at the auto space as well.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. Let's get this started. The first point, of course, is that no matter where we come from onto this, or where our expertise lies, the chaos I mentioned at the top is something that we all experience living here in India. And it's not just, of course, in India, but it's easy to sometimes pinpoint India having a specific problem. Let me go all the way across to you first then, and start with you, Rajiv.
Yes,
the point about this chaos, it's not new. Why is it taking us so long to find solutions?
Before I come to solutions, I think let's begin with the magnitude of this chaos, because this chaos is only going to increase, and unless or until we find some innovative solutions, it's not going to help us. So if I look at it a little more historically in terms of from where is this chaos coming, the country, as India as a whole currently, is having the second largest urban population that you can look for. So if I look at globally, China is probably the largest in terms of urban population. India is the second largest. If I look back into history, maybe in 1991, when the economic reforms started, we probably had 25% of our population into the urban cities. As we speak now, roughly it is 1/3, which is 33%. As we go ahead in future, it is going to be 50%. So by 2040, 2050, we are looking at roughly 50% of our population in the urban areas. If you look at most of these solutions that are coming around in terms of urban mobility, we are finding that collaboration is the biggest challenge. So you find that there are a lot of organizations, a lot of government bodies, there are a lot of technology solution providers who are working. But the important thing is, how do you make them collaborate with each other so that you can find solutions which are more effective? At the end of the day, we realize that for an individual, if any of us have to get out from office to the home, it is a big chaos for us, because depending on the choice, depending on the need of an individual, you may find that you may have to travel through different modes of travel. You may have to take a taxi from your office to some location, then you may have to take a bus or a train and then finally reach your home. And all of these are not integrated with each other. So I think collaboration is one of the biggest challenges in how to make people work together.
It's not seamless.
It's not seamless. It's not seamlessly integrated.
It gives rise to that whole phrase of Indian Standard Time, which is very unfortunate. But and I'm sure you've in your own dealings, Vijay, especially with global management, this keeps coming up, I'm sure, about how there is this problem in India. Now, it's one thing to joke about it, but when it comes to identifying what the real problem is, I mean, the real problem is not just the traffic jams or the mess outside. It's what causes those jams. What is your assessment?
So I think we should look at east and not to the west when we look at designing some of these solutions. So for instance, Tokyo is a far more dense city than New Delhi is, or even Bombay is, right? So if we look at east, so what have they done, and how has Tokyo solved it? Maybe it's too late to now start from where they started, but there are many technology opportunities that we can catch up on, we can ride on, so we can actually flip the older technology waves and go to the new ones. As we speak along this topic, I will update on some of these perspectives. Essentially collaboration, essentially planning. If I get to know exactly when my bus is reaching where, I don't need to be standing there. So the part of chaos is avoided. if I know exactly, if the world is connected the way it should be and the way it would be, you are looking at a future which is connected, future which is automatic, and future which is electric, as far as transportation is concerned. So when an electric, connected, and automatic vehicle, there's a lot more possibilities of information that the chaos can be avoided in the first place. So we will talk about this as we get along in the details.
In fact, Raj, that comes to the point about, very often the seemingly easy way out is to say, let's reduce the number of cars and bikes on the road and simply just put in lots of buses and, good connections to the metro, or indeed a better metro system or a better metro network. That's not the whole picture. So how can the vehicles that individuals drive also play a role?
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, the solution has to be a lot more holistic. And at Ford, when we look at this and the India context, you can really expand it to the global context because it is a global issue. And we see trends taking us towards global gridlock, which certainly is really a huge impediment to progress. And in terms of how we try to deal with it, we've looked at it with 4 key trends that we think are really driving us in that direction. And the first, you mentioned urbanization. That one is absolutely key, the density in urban centers, and again, a worldwide phenomenon, not just in India. The second is actually the rise of the global middle class, and India is a great example of that. And it's inherent, as we see that middle class doubling between now and 2025. And it's natural for people as they attain that economic status to want a vehicle. It's become a sign and a symbol of that progress. And so that one is another key trend. And then we see the issues around health in that urban context, and Delhi is the center point for discussions around air quality, and all of this ties back to that. And then the final piece we look at is the fact that consumer attitudes are really changing, particularly with the younger population. And the attitudes towards car ownership, public transport, and different modes of working between the two, that's really evolving. And so as we think about, well, what's going to be the best way forward for us collectively, we want to take a look at all of those 4 areas and see what are the optimal solutions that we can work towards.
Satish, a few years ago, in fact, I was going to say 10 years ago, but even 5 years ago, technology may not have necessarily been the first thing people would have mentioned, which would drive solutions. Today, it is a different world. It's also going to be more connected, as he said. Vehicles and vehicle management is an integral part of all of that. What is the Intel view on this?
So you have to think of it this way, right? Today, if you look at the growing trends, it's the gap between technology and automation or automotive, it's kind of really reducing, right? The second phenomena which is happening, especially with the Generation Y or the younger population, your expectation from automotive or anything that you get into, right? You want to continue with your digital life experience. You want to have that seamless experience continuing, whether it's at your home, it's dealing with the consumer devices, or you get into the car, right? And as my esteemed panelists talked about, right, it's about the ecosystem, it's not about your car. But having said that, I think we also need to continue or keep in mind that all these expectations level make a deciding factor when you buy a new vehicle or even you decide on your new transport, right? And I strongly believe that the Internet of Things can really play a huge role there, right? This is about investing or putting a smart technology and using that data which you extract from that to make intelligent decisions out of it, right? Intel strongly believes there is a huge play in that. We have invested it for a long time. And I think it's important to look at it's not only about the vehicle, but it's about the ecosystem you're talking about, whether it's a smart traffic lighting that you want to think about, you're talking about a smart parking lots, you're talking about automated toll gates, right? So all these things have to work seamlessly, right? And at the same time, what we also need to talk about is it's not only about connected, but how do we really make this whole thing secure, right? One is talking about the end-to-end solution, and second is talking about while it should work seamlessly, how do we really make it secure? That's what is going to drive the consumer experience.
Are you saying then that essentially, no matter which piece of the component you look at, it's all connected, to one cloud, to sort of one central system?
So think of it this way, right? Your Internet of Things is all about connecting devices, and in this case, probably your car is one device or a bus is one device which you're talking about, right? You are connecting that, extracting some data and putting it somewhere out in the cloud, right? You are pretty much taking not only the automotive data, but there are enough personal data that you're talking about, right? So I think the 3 important pillars in the Internet of Things or this end-to-end solution which we are talking about is one is the secure and seamless connectivity. Second is how do you really manage this, right? The manageability. And third is the security part of it from a data perspective. I think everything is built around these three pillars. If we really manage them, it's a great seamless solution which will give the expectation, or it will match with the expectations of the consumers that you're talking about.
Vijay, very often, no, go ahead.
Just comment on that. So essentially what we are talking is if we increase the throughput on our roads, the traffic, it can handle much more traffic than it handles today. So if we are connected, if we are collaborative, if we have the, as I said, even toll, just pass through the toll, don't have to wait anywhere. Increase the throughput, you can take maybe 3 times the traffic. And that's essentially possible only with use of technology.
The other thing is
projected as being 3 times at least, right?
Yeah.
Apart from increasing the throughput is also how to reduce the size of the vehicles. So can we have some solutions around micro-mobility? Because if you look at car, it occupies some amount of space, a good amount of space, and usually it is only individual travelers. So can you do something in terms of reducing? So I think that one of the solutions that may emerge going ahead, and this is all futuristic, is all about micro-mobility. So can you make people move? Or finally, you have to look at cars not as a status symbol alone, but look at cars more from a mobile solution perspective.
That's a logical thing there, isn't it? Because we're still a very aspirational market. And so to try and convince people that, you know, just as you sort of reach your time, so to speak, you know, we want you to compromise in some senses. That's where the problem also comes in.
So it's a mindset.
I think there is also a point to look at it. Can we look at making the public transport more efficient and secure, as well as connected stuff, right? It's more attractive. Today, as you said rightly, right, you are pretty much okay to go in a metro, but you are not really confident about whether I can reach on time, whether it's safe enough for me to do, whether I get all the information that I need about in terms of my travel constraint and all that stuff. So I think making that public distributions or public transport system, right, more efficient, more managed and efficient to work with from a consumer perspective, that will also solve a problem of making it micro.
Exactly.
I mean, ultimately, it really comes down to options. There's no single solution that's going to work across the spectrum. And we absolutely agree on the point of this micro-mobility, or the fact that cars in the future may not always have to be 4-passenger or 4+ passenger vehicles. There can be space for 1-passenger type opportunities, 2-passenger type opportunities, and it's really about optimizing for the particular need at a particular time, and the same applies to public transport. But the ability to deliver those optimized solutions when you need it, that's really the core, because, and that's where this concept of shared mobility comes in. Because if the transaction and the ownership stays the way it is, where I buy one vehicle, that vehicle is mine, and I'm the only one who uses it, that really hinders some of that shared mobility type of concept. Versus if you have a situation where you and a pool, and let's say it's a pool of your coworkers, perhaps it's the people who live in your apartment complex, you have access to a set of vehicles. Some may be the 1-passenger vehicle, the 2-passenger vehicle, some may be the larger 7-passenger vehicle, and you adapt and share based on your daily need or for a particular situation.
So we've got plenty more to talk about. We have to slip into a very short break here. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are going to carry on this discussion straight away. And, you know, we were talking very broadly in the first segment. Now let's speak about specifically what can happen with individual vehicles. High occupancy vehicle lanes and things like that aren't new. We haven't been able to try some of that in India because perhaps, you know, we can't always police these things in India. But going back to that whole talk about carpooling, let me just get a general sense of why it's a very old idea, but it hasn't taken off in India. I mean, safety and you know, security becomes a huge part of that in a chaotic environment like ours. So before we come to that specific example that I want from you, let me get that from you. You know, what's holding us back? It's a logical, very simple solution.
Yeah, so let me first add to what he said, and it's related to what you asked. If I really look at it, apart from the psychological content, its angle, it's also about the mindset of the individual. So in India, or if you look at even other parts of the globe, you find that buying a car is more a status symbol. Okay, so it's not just about saying that let's go and rent a car. Okay, so that mindset is firstly that we need to bring about a change. And I think that if that mindset changes and people start looking car as a mobile solution rather than a status symbol, that will be the first step in making that. Now, I think that has to be driven by both. There has to be a lot of awareness about looking at cars more as a mobile solution. I think there are ample number of examples around the globe, if you see, where government is playing a key role. They are trying to ensure that by putting some surcharges, by putting some extra cost to owning a vehicle and to driving a vehicle yourself. So if you look at some of the cities in China, for example, there are odd and even numbers which are allowed to drive on a particular day. And that puts a little amount of restriction on people in terms of driving their own car. And that's what changes the behavior and slowly tends towards looking at kind of solutions that Raj spoke about, which is carpooling or sharing a car. So those kinds of changes is what we will have to look for in future, if you think that those mindsets have to be kind of changed.
Tell us what you're doing in Bangalore.
Yeah, so we actually, in the course of thinking about our blueprint for mobility and how we move forward on this, we've kicked off an initiative that we called Ford Smart Mobility, and we're doing actually 25 experiments globally, really around a lot of the topics that we're discussing. And one of the key experiments we're doing is actually in Bangalore, and it's a share car project with a company called Zoom Car, and it's exploring exactly this. What is the way for a small group, and I mentioned whether it be co-workers or people who live in the same apartment complex, to really effectively use shared mobility, with the idea that a single vehicle, in this case, as you start out, can be shared amongst multiple users, so that one, it really lowers the barriers to access, it increases the affordability of having a vehicle, and it certainly improves the utilization of that vehicle. And there are a lot of unknowns. There are a lot of unanswered questions right now about the best ways to coordinate that usage, the best way to be efficient, where when person A needs the vehicle, it's available and it's not already out running for person B. How do you deal with a lot of those?
But you are talking about different people driving the same vehicle.
Different people driving the same vehicle at different times, and having a level of coordination that allows them to do that efficiently. And this is an area that we think is going to be fundamental in terms of mobility in the future. And so those unanswered questions really need to be worked on now. And this pilot is a really exciting way to get into that.
When you talk about specifically, let's say, vehicle development, for a model like this to work, car sharing, for example, of course the cars we have today can easily do the job.
Yes.
But is there something that needs to change on the vehicle as well to make it more efficient, to make it, or to let people say that, all right, you know what, I'm more open to the idea?
You're right. I mean, see, if that's the vehicle, then I'm not looking. How do I buy a vehicle? If you look at the decision making of buying a vehicle, if I'm looking at torque and therefore how much acceleration in the first 3 seconds or 6 seconds or whatever,
I look at that.
Yeah. Correct. So that's not the vehicle you are looking at when you are sharing it. Yeah, that's the vehicle that is shared with everybody. So you are looking at probably cost.
Yeah.
So you are looking at, but then that exists. So right, the solutions or the product, as Rajiv was saying, that you need such a product for these solutions. It does exist, and maybe from Ford it exists as well. So essentially, you are looking at something more to it, which is, let's say, diagnostics, and diagnostics being available for that pool of car owners. So let's say all of us own one car together, as the model that he said. Then on my mobile phone, can I get the diagnostic data as it is going? As the car is maybe driven by you, but I get the diagnostic data, so I know what to expect.
How badly you're driving.
What not to expect from this car. So there are certain informational aspects and technological aspects which do exist. They need to be put in together for such a mobility solution to work. And therefore, it needs to be a conscious decision from what Ford is doing. Let's say, as an OEM, it needs to be a conscious push to the community here at large, that they try these experiments out.
So the whole point is that usually, whenever you talk about such things, a lot of times, the average consumer is going to say, "Hey, that sounds like a great idea," but to them somehow it gets communicated that this is either going to be too expensive or somehow inconvenient. What role can technology play in making the economies of scale of things like this work better, cheaper, easier?
So it's a great question, right? Think of it, if traditionally, if you look at electronics or a technology in a car, it's been revolving around entertainment and a driver safety aspect of it. That's how we have always looked at it from a technology in a car, right? Today it's evolving a lot more than that. Rajiv mentioned about it. Obviously the safety aspect is getting more and more, not only for the driver but also for the passengers. But it's also about how do we really get the predictive diagnostic or driver behavior and all those kind of stuff. Now it matters a lot in terms of a public vehicles than a private vehicle, right? But think of it from a affordability or a usability perspective. Today if you have a predictive diagnostic, there are insurance companies who are, and we as a Intel has been running a pilot pretty much in Bangalore, is about connecting a device inside the car which gives you all data about your driver patterns and how you drive, about your rash driving, smooth driving. And there are insurance companies who are looking at how do I give you a personalized insurance based on your driving pattern, right? That's technology which can make a difference. And it's all about technology which is just accumulating the data or collecting data from your own vehicle, analyzing it and giving you an informed decision, right? Which really benefits. Now that has a long term, if you have to look at it in terms of a total cost of ownership, right? That has a big implication. Also what it requires is, and which is what we are working with the global giants like Ford of the world, is driving those technologies inside the vehicle or in the public transport system, right? Which obviously require a lot more compute power, and that's what Intel is good at. We drive Moore's law, right? Now, if we are moving away from a personalized experience to getting to predictive maintenance, and hopefully sooner than later about the anonymous drivers, right? Or anonymous cars, which obviously require a lot more technology. Now that's a little futuristic, but it's not far away. There are trials which are running around all over the world.
It's not science fiction anymore, that's
absolutely.
for sure.
Yeah,
IoT is pretty much a reality, right?
Yeah.
It's no more a hype. There are real solutions which are implemented in the system, and pretty much in India too.
We know the technology already exists.
Yeah.
And there's actually I won't say there's a part of me, there's all of me who doesn't want that to happen.
Yeah.
But I understand why it might need to.
Yeah.
I do want to speak more about specifically what happens to these vehicles and what shape they might take in the future, but got to take a short break here. We'll come back with that conversation. Stay tuned. Welcome back. We are going to jump straight into what happens with the individual cars in the future, if we can try and predict that to a certain extent. Car-to-car communication is something that we've started hearing about it. All the global motor shows, a lot of the OEMs talk about it too. Specifically from Ford, what do you currently have, and what that can literally be implemented tomorrow, and what are you working on?
Well, the whole idea of autonomous driving is getting a lot of discussion amongst all the global OEMs and the car-to-car communication that can be enabled by that. When we look at today, we already have a wide array of semi-autonomous solutions on the road. So whether it be some of our cars that can parallel park themselves, or cars that will keep you in your lane and help you if you start to drift across on the highway, or cars that will do pre-collision mitigation and will allow you to track behind vehicles in front of you and brake to a full stop if needed. And so a lot of those solutions are finding a very high degree of consumer acceptance and are working very well even in our current scenario. And they're all the stepping stones to that next level, which would be the full autonomous vehicle. And we have vehicles on the road right now in test that are using LiDAR technology and essentially taking that next step where they do full 3D mapping and they allow the vehicle to operate in a pilotless manner. I will tell you that as we do that work, Ford's perspective on it is that the driver always needs to be there and involved. So we don't want a situation or a solution where the vehicle literally goes in autonomous and does everything on its own. We feel the driver should be able and available to step in at any point if he or she chooses and wants to make corrections.
But it would be nice if it drives up to you at the hotel porch. And
that actually...
You don't have to go looking for it.
That is actually the next step. So right now our vehicle can park itself with you in it. The next level is absolutely being worked on, which is where it can come pick you up when you want to pull out of the spot. So it's actually not as far away as you might think.
Some of the stuff that you said already exists in cars today, and we've seen this from many manufacturers, and I know there's areas that Bosch works on as well. Collision mitigation, for example. I mean, these are great solutions, and in an Indian context, it can really help. City safety from Volvo being another example can really help. I know all of them are now doing it. It becomes prohibitively expensive. I mean, a lot of consumers would like to opt for it if you give them a choice, but they'll certainly opt for the leather seats and the sunroof instead. How do you change that? How do you make it cheaper?
Actually, I don't think technology is expensive. It's the way it's positioned that's expensive. And I'll tell you why I say that. The moment you want airbags...
I wanted you to say that.
Yeah, the moment you buy airbags, you get also alloy wheels, because that's how the cars are positioned. So the lowest end car does not have airbag, it does not have alloy wheels, it does not have a navigation system and so on. So the moment you say, I want only airbags, that solution is available with the highest end car. Now, the OEM and the positioning, it's done by dealers in India, is such that when you want safety, you also get luxury.
Yeah.
And if you could divide that into saying, I want first a basic car, then a safe car, and then a luxury car, it's just a way of positioning. The technology itself, my perspective to it is technology makes it cheaper and not expensive, as Moore's law, Intel was saying this. So essentially, from just a word on technology, we have a lot more software going in the cars today than it was 20 years ago. So if you buy a Daimler S-Class, let's say you are paying 15% of the price by software, 30% for electronics. And
Sure.
if you're looking at that trend, and why is that so? Because software makes it easy to adapt to the end user requirements, and even after having sold the vehicle, you can still make software modifications for the adaptability to the end user. This is not possible with the hardware electronics. It's not possible at all with the mechanical components. So if you want to make a change that goes to the user as a feature, it takes, let's say, 6 months by software, 1.5 years by electronics change, and 3 years by mechanical change. So if you have to bring in a change, software is the key. So if software is driving the sophistication in the vehicle, the cost is coming down. It's not going up. So per se, it's the way it's only the way it's positioned, and this is my view.
Yeah, the point about the seamless connectivity to the cloud, it sounds fantastic, and in a city like Delhi, it could really turn things around, where everybody's or every component is talking to the other one, especially in terms of declogging certain roads at rush hour and things like that.
Yes.
Government regulation becomes key.
Yes.
How much of a push needs to come from government then?
No, government has to play a very critical role, I would say, in fact. Because the OEMs, the tier ones, the technology companies, look at the financial companies and so on, they can only come out with some solutions. But unless and until a lot of enablement is done by the government to make these solutions work, they will not happen. So unless and until the government plays a very critical role in terms of ensuring that the infrastructure, whatever infrastructure, whether it is in terms of railways, in terms of roadways, in terms of whatever taxis and other things which are applying, are all interconnected, and it makes it mandatory, it won't happen. Today, if I think of a futuristic solution, yesterday in fact someone was talking to me and I was saying that it would have been so great if I would have left office. At the time of leaving office, I would have just checked, I have a metro station very close by. If real time someone could tell me at what time is the metro train leaving from that station. Yeah. If at real time someone could say if the metro train is not there, this is the real time at which the bus is going to come. Can there be a GPS fitted hence in the bus?
Center, so to speak, who controls that?
So all this has to be integrated at the top somewhere, because I want all this on a single application. I want some technology company to say that, okay, this is your smartphone. You open this app. On this app, you can look at metro, you can look at bus, you can look at the empty taxi floating around your office. You can book the taxi when you want. That kind of a solution, which is highly integrated, if it has to come, unless and until you have the government thinking in that direction and then saying that, okay, I want to integrate all my modes of transportation, and it makes it mandatory for certain things to happen, it won't, because there is a cost attached to it.
Especially in a market like ours, I suppose.
Yeah, especially a market
From
like
a
ours.
smart city perspective, government can enable a consortium which does it.
Yes.
Let's say this is a consortium.
That's why I was asking
KPMG,
who
Bosch,
controls it.
Ford, and Intel, we can make a consortium, and
We've
we
got
can
one
run
right
it for
here.
Delhi.
Yeah.
Right?
A very effective panel right here. that can
It
do
ultimately has to be. It can't be dependent just on government. It has to be the consortium, the collaborative approach.
Going forward, a lot of young people will be very interested in knowing what solution exists. In fact, we've got a lot of them in our audience. We want to take questions from them as well. So we're going to do that in just a bit, but one more short break, and then we have questions from the audience. Stay tuned. Welcome back. We are now going to integrate our studio audience into this discussion. We have lots of questions from them. I'm told that a lot of you have questions, and ma'am, you have one. So please, why don't you go ahead and, if you would just pass her the mic.
So will automated driving in the future also help in boosting smarter mobility?
So think of it this way, any technology that you are adding into a vehicle which is making it more smarter and connected is obviously going to make it more efficient from a user perspective, right? Automated driving is one aspect to it, but as Vijay was talking about, it's not only about making it automated, but using technology for the right thing, which really drives the productivity of the user to a higher level. It makes it more efficient. We need to look at it, the technology usage from that perspective rather than looking at only from automation perspective, right?
So one example I can give you why it will be better driving, right? If all of us drove automated vehicles and these, let's say these are cars on a road, this will move like a fleet because the cars will talk to each other. So you can imagine a very large bus or a train. It will move so smooth because everything everything is connected, so to speak. And that throughput for such a system will be far higher than what is driven today. So just as one example to give you a perspective of what can happen.
Sounds like utopia. All right, ma'am, you have a question as well?
Can you suggest some examples of how global cities have managed to decongest with smarter mobility solutions?
Rajiv, do you have any examples for us?
So let me go to the east. There are a lot of examples. If you look at the eastern side of the globe, and you find that some of the cities have come up with solutions which are already available, already kind of working. If I look at a city like Hong Kong, then I find that in that place, the smart mobility, I'm not talking in terms of really smart vehicles as such, but some of the systems which have been provided by the entire ecosystem does work very well. So you find that in a city like Hong Kong, the average travel time is pretty less as compared to a city like New Delhi. So there, the average travel distance is just around about 10.5 kilometers. The travel time is around about 16 to 18 minutes. We take around about here on an average 25-30 minutes to travel. And this is only increasing. If I look at Delhi and if I look at NCR, it is still far higher. However, there at the same time, the solution is more towards integrated solution and usage of public transport. So if I look at a city like Hong Kong, 92% of the mobility is taken care of by public transport / cycling / walking. Now in India, the usage of public transport is just round about 28-29%. That is phenomenally low.
Staggering difference.
So there is a vast difference. There are solutions available around the globe where you see umpteen number of solutions where mobility is taken care of in a far more better manner.
And what you're talking about isn't futuristic. It's existing infrastructure or the existing vehicles as well. So it's not something that needs a lot of investment necessarily.
Absolutely. This is what I'm saying, existing. Okay. And there, if you think of travel, I have been to Hong Kong where I find that if you think of travel, you have octopus cards which are available. The same card works at a metro station, it works at the ferry, it works at the bus, it works in the taxi, it works when you go for the restaurants. So it works all across.
More efficient.
So it's more efficient.
All right, more questions. Ma'am, you have one too, I'm told. Please go ahead.
Hello, sir. My question is, unlike other countries, why hasn't the electric and hybrid vehicles taken off here in India? I mean, what's probably the main reason behind it?
Actually, Raj, you got to tell us this because you have a fleet of those in your US portfolio, for example.
We do. So from a global standpoint, in Ford, we cover the entire range from hybrid to plug-in hybrid to fully electric vehicles. And when we talk about it in the India context, and perhaps why haven't those vehicles been brought to India, there are a few key elements that come to the fore. Really, there does need to be a specific government policy to support, and there are a lot of discussions taking place actually right now, and there are likely to be some developments coming quite soon. There also needs to be a degree of consumer pull. So customers like yourselves have to be willing to pay, and today there's still a premium for those types of technologies. You have to be willing to pay a premium for the additional efficiency, the benefits to the environment and such. And those two pieces really need to come together to create the opportunity. So there are electrified vehicles in India today, but the number is very small because those two inputs haven't had large enough scale. We do expect that will change as we move forward. How quickly it changes will really be dependent on both factors. So how quickly consumers like you start to feel perhaps differently about electrified solutions, and how significant the government moves and incentives are towards driving that electrification.
Well, there's something that people keep saying is going to give. It's about to happen is what we're told, at least from the policy point of view. So let's hope for that.
To add one perspective,
yes, sir.
it's okay with it because typically when you talk of electric vehicles, you generally think of green and you think of environment alone. But having driven some electric vehicles, I can say that the experience of driving an electric vehicle is completely different. Yeah. I really don't look at it from a green perspective, but I also look at it from a luxury perspective. Because the moment you get into an electric car, no mechanical parts. You switch on the car, you don't get to know the car is on. You drive it, you press the accelerator, you move. There are no vibrations. It really gives you a kind of a feeling of no sound, no noise, nothing. Yes. So also we need to kind of bring that awareness. I think that every time we think of electric vehicles, we only think of green. Yeah. We don't think also from the luxury perspective, because that's another factor that people consider while buying a car.
True. Adds to the smoothness, yes. More questions? Yes, you have one. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, sir. So my question is that should the government look out to make buying cars more expensive so there are lesser cars on the road to avoid traffic jams and all?
There are people who agree with that. I don't. But taxation to begin with in India is not low for the automobile industry. So how much more can the government really push this point, do you think, Rajiv?
So I'm not a proponent of this perspective. I would rather have, as I said, increase the throughput through infrastructure than reduce the throughput through, reduce the buying of the cars so the throughput remains the same. And so it's basically the other way around, I'm saying. So it can remain as it is, and you can have smarter solutions, connected solutions, so that you have a better driving possibility than having lesser cars.
But could you have certain zones within a city, let's say, which are higher toll or a tax?
This is definitely possible. So you can imagine. See, there was a solution of Hong Kong he talked about. I have been in Seattle. In Seattle, you have certain times, the office times, the downtown Seattle, you can hop on any bus and hop it off anytime at free of cost. So you bring your vehicles to a certain point of the city, and then you say you park it there, and then for the center of the city where the traffic density is very high, you could have some effective solutions, either of free kind, so it's attractive, or you charge them very high, like in Singapore. You have electronic road pricing, which kicks off at office time. You have to pay higher toll than the off the office time. So it's a different perspective. You either give it free, charge them high, either way, don't bring them into the center of the city. So this is possible for specific zones than simply pushing the cars so expensive that nobody buys.
I think the taxation is quite high as it is. The tough question here is that very often when it is an innovation that ends up also becoming a USP of sorts, whether it's an automaker or whether it's a technology company, how much sharing happens then? Because you want, obviously, as a consumer, the entire ecosystem to adopt it.
Right.
And if there are different stakeholders involved, how easy is it to share this wonderful solution?
So think of it this way, right? As individuals, we have been a part of ecosystem, and all of us, there has been a collaboration where we have been working in bits and pockets today. It's probably more visible globally than in India. But I think from an India perspective, as we were talking about in previously, right? Government can play a key role in driving the policy, putting the regulations in place, and then put an ecosystem in place the technology people who can really drive that implementation, right? Yeah. If once we do that, I think that's pretty much realistic. I don't think it's far away.
That's probably the way to go. One more question, yes, at the back, please, go ahead.
As we discussed about the efficient management of the public transport, so let's take the example of DTC, which is currently in the so-called government hands. So I just want to ask that fully privatization of these buses will help out? If yes, then how? If we keep the factor of fares aside.
That's valid. You already have CNG as one sort of a solution that was presented to Delhi, and the private buses were taken off the road. But by privatizing in turn the public corporation, can it become more efficient?
So this maybe Rajiv is better off in answering that, but my perspective is it's a change of management. So unless you're saying that there are change of strategies around that change of management, then you are looking at a different perspective or a different solution. But only a pure change of management, I don't know how that.
So a change in management probably a change in management probably can give you some efficiency improvement, because you will be managing the entire fleet, the utilization of the vehicles, the turnaround times and so on can go up. But then it's not going to be significant. In my opinion, probably it will create a small impact if you move. But a significant impact, if you're saying, is integrated with the metro system which is coming up. The moment you think that I have my trains which are moving around now in Delhi, and that's going from phase 2 to phase 3 to phase 4, can I integrate my bus system with this railway system? Can I move seamlessly between a metro station and a bus with the same ticket? Today it's a big challenge. Can I ensure that the points are made a little more, the point-to-point movement is made a little more door-to-door movement with the help of trains and buses together?
And that can
is the direction that we need to take.
That can happen today.
That can happen, because we have a bus system, we have a train system, but the two don't talk to each other. Both are government, but they don't talk to each other.
Any other questions? Does anybody? Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, sir. My question is, first I like to ask the question to the Vijay sir. As you said that the technology is very cheaper nowadays, but if we need to implement an autonomous car in our India, it costs $75,000. How can it be a cheaper one, sir?
When I say technology is cheaper, it's not where the price is positioned, because today maybe very few cars are made and therefore the whole R&D cost is loaded on that car. But technology per se, brings the cost down. If you look at today's semiconductors, they are far more powerful, far more cheaper than 15 years ago, and they can do a lot more. And more modern vehicles have a lot more semiconductors, a lot more software going in. Therefore, technology is bringing the cost down for the feature, per feature that is in the car. Now, from the perspective of autonomous vehicle in India, first of all, this was a question asked to me in another panel discussions. I think it will be far too safe to drive. It will simply not drive. It will be too safe. Because everybody will be moving around it, across it, in
It'll
front
have all
of it.
these alarms going off.
Imagine a pedestrian detection, lane detection, all of these detections on an autonomous vehicle. So it takes some more time for us to look at what is an Indian autonomous vehicle. And then we are probably talking of what we need in our context, then a better solution at that.
And then that'll be a jugaad solution, so it won't be expensive.
It's not basically the technology that's expensive, it's the way it's positioned today, but essentially technology is bringing the costs down as I see it from the...
and going into the future, it will continue to go further down.
Based on the volume, right now it's the volume game, not the technology.
That's always the case. Well, that's it. We're definitely out of time, so I would love to have taken more questions from you. Maybe you guys can still have some more questions for the panel once we wrap this up, but thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today. We certainly hope at least some of what we've discussed today starts to actually show up in the chaos around us. And of course, the larger solutions as well is something that we hope the government is also thinking about. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.